Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, Shawn Busse, Jaci Russo, and Jay Goltz discuss what it takes to stand out these days, especially if your business, like most businesses, isn't really the next big thing. What about trash collection? What if your business is selling scrap metal? What if you happen to be one of 69 picture framers in Chicago? What's an owner to do to stand out then? Is it enough to execute really well? Can any business make itself remarkable? Shawn, Jay, and Jaci all believe it's possible, and they offer examples from their own businesses as well as those they've observed. Plus, as Google waffles about whether it's going to kill cookies on Chrome, will business owners still be able to target customers digitally? And Jay's not happy about a very big bill he got from his accounting firm. Should he just go ahead and pay it? Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations, brought to you by our sponsor, The Great Game of Business, will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. In fact, that's the whole idea behind the 21 Hats community, engaging with other owners to get the kinds of insights only another entrepreneur can offer. If you're interested in learning more, step one is to sign up for a free trial of the Morning Report, which highlights the most important news of the day for business owners so you don't have to go looking for it. Step two is to get on our Slack channel, where you can ask questions, get vendor recommendations, and tap the wisdom of a very impressive crowd. Just Google the 21 Hats Morning Report to subscribe. Joining me this week on the podcast are regulars Shawn Busse, CEO of Kinesis, which is based in Portland, Oregon, and works with small businesses on marketing, culture, and strategy. Jay Goltz is CEO of the Goltz Group, whose companies in Chicago include a picture frame business, artist frame service, and a home furnishing store, Jaci Home. And Jaci Russo is CEO of Brand Russo, a marketing agency based in Lafayette, Louisiana. The episode is titled, Can We All Be Purple Cows? Welcome, Shawn, Jay, and Jaci. It's great to have you here. I want to talk today about something I've wondered about for a while. We often hear the advice that it's a bad idea to try to sell a product or service that is viewed as a commodity. You need to find a niche or to distinguish yourself in some way. But here's my question. Aren't some businesses just commodity businesses? And if so, what can a small business do to succeed if it's pretty much a commodity business? Jaci, have you thought about this at all?
We've worked with a number of clients in that space with that predicament. So I guess I would start with name a commodity business, because I would say there aren't really any of those anymore. Even if you look at water and toilet paper, there's some differentiators there. There's some place where they've put themselves, whether it's through packaging or through pricing or through promotion, to try to separate themselves from the herd. You know, humans are a pack animal. And so we want to blend in. It's our nature. But if we don't find a way to stand out, you're not going to be a very successful business for long.
Garbage collection, that's not commodities. The people to pick up your garbage, that's not a commodity business.
I would tell you that Lafayette, Louisiana, where I live, we've just been through 2 different rounds of contracts with different garbage pickup services. They are vastly different in their offerings, in their pricing, in the performance of their service. And we as homeowners don't get to choose, but the council did. And we very much missed the one we used to have. It was a difference.
So you think, Jaci, if somebody comes to you and looks like a commodity business, pretty much any business, you can turn them around and make them not a commodity business?
We did it for a milk company. Dairy is probably one of the biggest commodities, and I just use air quotes, out there. And we were able to work with this regional dairy and help them go from zero market share. They were entering new markets for the first time. And within about 6 months, had 18% of the market share against organics, heritage, and store brand, even though they were not as healthy as organic. They were more expensive than the store brand. And heritage means people have just been buying it for generations and generations, and you just buy the same thing that everybody bought. But we were able to carve out a niche for them.
Shawn, let me ask you kind of the same question, but a slightly different way. As I'm sure you're well aware, Seth Godin wrote a book called Purple Cow, Transform Your Business by Being Remarkable. It's a very readable book, and I think it's obviously good advice. If you can distinguish yourself, you should probably distinguish yourself. But can we all be purple cows? Can any business be remarkable? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, since we specialize, we're not in the consumer space like Jaci is. We're almost entirely B2B. And there are definitely some strong commodity businesses in B2B. I remember meeting a guy who basically his business was buying scrap steel. Like, that's it. He's buying scrap steel from manufacturers who have, offcuts and waste and so forth. And boy, that is a tough business because the buyer in that space is some sort of a procurement type of person. And so they're buying largely on price, and it's hard to defeat that. I ultimately walked away from the engagement, even though he wanted to put money on the table, because I could tell that I don't think he was willing to do what would have needed to be done to be a purple cow. And I think that for companies where they're closer to being a pure commodity, you have to be a lot more bold. And usually that boldness comes in either the form of culture, where you're really creating a place where employees are really engaged and doing amazing work, because then the customer feels that, and then you're differentiated on that. Or the offering, like the process, the way you do things is significantly different in the way you deliver that commodity. And both of those things require a lot of vision from the leader. And a lot of times what I have found, at least in my experience, is that a lot of commodity-based businesses, the leaders are really fixated on winning by price, by being cheaper than the other guy, as opposed to service, delivery process, or culture.
Well, you left a whole piece out, though. There's a whole piece to that, which is, what if the company figured out how to do it cheaper? Because I've sold scrap. When I cut aluminum frames, we used to sell barrels of, the scrap.
Yeah.
What if they figured out, they've got a good location that's closer to the customers, therefore I'm paying my truck driver a lot less to go pick up every day, and they figured out how to get it to the scrap recycler cheaper? That is another angle that somebody figured out. Walmart, someone figured out how to do things cheaper and pass the savings along. So that's the commodity, but you can still, win by getting your costs down.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And you might layer into that, like, say, technology, right? So you could put a piece of technology in place that made you far more efficient than your competition. I tend to think that those kind of moves, they can be copied more easily than the moves that I'm suggesting. So that's why I go to those places first, is that culture is really hard. It's really hard to do in a commodity space. So if you can do it, it's much harder for your competition to catch up to you. It's much more of a moat strategy. I think the way you deliver your service to your customer, something that we've called the proprietary way, which is a combination of people, service, really process, that amalgam is a sort of a secret sauce that's really hard to copy, versus, a technology play. Once your competitors figure out that technology, if they can buy it off the shelf or build it themselves, it's a little easier to copy. So I'd say yes, and to what you're saying, Jay.
Well, and I'll just jump back in. Shawn, we're about 90% B2B too. And so, sure, we've dealt with companies that make widgets and, small, intricate details inside their industries. But I think there's always a way to separate. If you didn't start your business knowing you were going to do something different and better than the rest of the competition, why'd you start?
Well, this will get Jay riled up. A lot of times these commodity businesses, they're owned by second and third generation. And so you also often have that factor layered in that it was their father, their mother, their grandfather, their grandmother that actually was the innovator. And they are sort of like keeping the thing going. And so sometimes that can be really challenging to be the innovator when you're the second or third generation.
Jay, let me ask a question. I think we have someone here who might be able to answer Jaci's question. And that's you, Jay. I hope you don't take offense at this, but isn't picture framing something of a commodity business? How many picture framers were there in Chicago?
No way.
Well, let Jay answer. How many picture framers were there in Chicago when you opened up?
Back in the day of the Yellow Pages, I remember counting the number of frame shops. This is probably 20 years ago. There were 69 frame shops.
Wait, you opened 40 years ago. Right.
So I'm just saying at its peak, which was probably in 2000, 25 years ago, there were 16, and you got to remember, the framing industry was in a boom for many years because of the baby boomers and they were framing pictures. The framing industry really, basically, I've been there from the beginning. When I started, it was just starting to pick up steam, and it grew tremendously for the next 45 years. And then it got mature. So then what happened? The chain stores started to pick it up, and now the independent frame shops have shrunk. So there used to be 69 frame shops in Chicago, and now there's about 22. And nationally, there were 25,000 frame shops, and now it's 6,000. So it's a commodity in that a lot of people do it, but it's certainly not a commodity if you do it right. There's a huge difference between a well-run framing business and someone who just showed up and is doing mediocre framing. There's no question, which is why my business grew so much. I didn't know this, and I certainly couldn't put the words on it back when I didn't start out and go, oh, I'm going to differentiate myself and, brand myself better. I just did a better job. I was more committed to taking care of customers and having better frames and having better people working there and having a better turnaround and having better quality. So I just wanted to run a better business, which you can now use a bunch of words to describe, which is differentiation. But that is why I'm bigger than everyone else.
I mean, what we're talking about here, and I think all three of us will agree on this, is brand experience. And so that is how you can elevate yourself out of a commodity space. So what Jay's describing, right? It's the customer experience. It's the framer's knowledge of the product, their ability to add the right value and solution to the customer's experience. Those are all decommodification strategies that involve culture, customer differentiation, on and on and on and on. And so I think that when you are in a space that's heavily commoditized, those are your ways. We've done this with clients that are in commodity spaces. I think Jaci has done this with clients. It's about going for brand. And I mean that not from a pretty logo and a pretty website, but actually the customer experience and the employee experience. And if you get those two things right, you've actually kind of beat about 90% of your competition at that point.
You know what? I've learned it's about being 10% better. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about all the stuff you're describing, brand, which is everything you do, the way your employees dress, the way they talk, where your office is, what your sign looks like. Does your chair in your waiting room have a rip in it? All of those things added together maybe add up to 5-10% of your business. You do that for 30 years. One company does 10 million and the other company's doing $1 million. It's about being a little bit better. So yes, it's about running a better business with good branding and good messaging. And I think our point is any business can benefit from being non-commodity by attempting to make your business a little bit better, whether it's the way you are branded, your ads. Maybe the person that comes and picks up the scrap is just friendlier than the other guy. Stuff like that makes
Jay, you're talking about execution.
Yeah.
And I guess my question is executing well, running the business well, is that enough to take you from a commodity business to a non-commodity business?
Yes,
absolutely.
Okay.
Because execution comes from process comes from intention comes from planning, and that's how businesses separate themselves. It is shocking to me how few companies, and I'm sure Shawn will agree, how few companies in the B2B and B2C space actually spend the time to plan out their strategic marketing approach. Instead, they are reactive. Shiny thing, I'm going to do it. Sales pitch from a cute girl, I'm going to do it. And now all of a sudden they say, why is half my budget wasted? Well, because you didn't plan it.
Here, I'll give you an example. I just went to a doctor's office out in the middle of nowhere, and the office was all nice looking and stuff. And the woman behind the counter is wearing a hoodie with blue something on it. And it just, you know what? It's a doctor's office. Don't wear a hoodie sweatshirt with printing on it. It doesn't look good. I stopped recommending anymore because they don't listen. They will say, this is the line they always say when you tell them something you can do better. Oh, no one cares about that. And the answer is, you know what? You're 95% right. I'm probably only 1 out of 20 people to think, gee, I'd feel a little better if the person behind the counter looked like a professional. And maybe only 1 out of 20 people, but that's 5%. That's the difference between being a little bit better.
Yeah, see, I got to take issue with your simplification, Lauren. I think saying that it's execution is too simplified. And yes, absolutely. We all know most businesses, especially at the corporate level, they are terrible at execution. They're just awful. But that's just a piece of it. I think there's a seductive aspect of execution, which is that, wow, I can create lists, I can check things off lists, I can have a process for everything. And that is wonderful stuff. It's also highly copyable. There are pieces of what Jay is telling in terms of his story that are not execution. They are pieces of affinity within employees. They're pieces of feeling appreciated. They're pieces of recruiting and retention. These are not really execution things. So when you say execution, you start to get into this world of operations, which is really important. I don't want to downplay the significance of that, but improving execution is generally kind of a linear output to it. Whereas things like culture, process, differentiation, remarkability, those are exponential things. And I really want to caution us about simplifying it to, oh, you just need to execute better, because that's not what actually Jay has done.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, but I'm wondering whether it's a word. I hear what I just heard you say is different than what you said. What I'm hearing you saying, you can say execution, but it's really what's behind the execution that makes the difference. And I totally agree with that
right.
You're right. It's, get delivery better. It's not the case. The issue isn't give better deliverables. It's learn how to hire better and keep your employees around. So I absolutely hear your point with it is execution, but it's really about how do you pull that off? And that's what the issue is.
And then the problem is the internet has all driven us to follow this whole like listicle idea, right? 10 ways you can become better at hiring. It's like, okay, that's fine. But underpinning all of that stuff is, what is your mission? What are your values? What do you care about? How do you treat customers? These are things that I think, Jaci, I think you and I would agree. These are strategic and like really powerful and meaningful aspects of the business that then should drive the execution. And so I just really caution when we start talking about execution, you could run down this path of like best practices and copying other people. And those things are good, but the underpinning of that is way more important, like 1,000%.
Always.
Okay, so that's interesting. So all you're saying, which makes sense, is it's about corporate culture drives execution. So instead of banging on, execute better, it's really about your corporate culture includes how are you taking care of customers, which is execution. So I would agree with you, a better word to tell someone if you really want to succeed in business and grow, instead of saying execute better, work on your corporate culture, because that's going to enable you to execute better. And I fully agree with that. Are we on the same page with?
Yes. And like culture, huge. And I think not to be undervalued in the conversation about execution. And then also, I think to your other point, Jay, it's like there's business, the strategy, like how are you going to market? What is the offering? How is it remarkably different? Like we talked about all these picture framers that existed. And I think you've outlasted and outlived a lot of them because they were sort of business as usual, right?
Well, the business was growing so much, they just had to show up and you could do okay.
Yeah, right. And in a good, rising tide, it's like, oh, we're all so talented here and you did something different. And I think that's the other side of the coin. So you have culture and then differentiation and remarkability.
Jay, the question that Jaci asked was, if you're not going to do something different, why would you even start the business? What were you thinking when you started your business? Did you think that you were going to be different than all those other?
Absolutely. No, that's why I got in the business. First of all, I loved picture framing. I loved the whole process of finding the right frame for the right picture and making a picture look great. And I loved framing, but I also knew enough about frame shops to know that you'd bring a picture in and you'd say, when will it be done? 4 or 5 weeks. Give me a call. We'll see. And I thought to myself,
did you really know that was standard?
Absolutely. I went with my mother one time. This was a one-time experience. My mother framed one picture, and my mother didn't drive. So I probably drove her to the frame shop. I was probably 17 years old or 16 years old. I drove her to the frame shop, and it was a dusty old, frame shop. And I thought to myself, why would it take 5 weeks to frame a picture? It's not like they're growing the tree and then they got to cut it down. And so yes, that was typical in the framing business at the time, that we'll get it done when we get it done. And what I didn't realize till I was in my late 20s and business was growing like crazy, I didn't realize that my attitude towards customer was very different than many frame shop owners. I grew up in my father's dime store taking care of customers. I enjoyed customers. I like customers. I support customers. And I found out that a lot of people that were in the frame business viewed themselves as some kind of artist, which is the opposite of customer driven. When you think about it, customer driven is, what do they need? Give it to them. Artist driven is, look what I made. Oh, you don't like it? You're an idiot. Get out.
Fact.
Hey, as an artist, I resent that characterization.
Okay, but you have to agree that artists do things to make themselves happy. They don't ask a customer, what color do you think I should paint this picture?
That is true.
That's what I'm saying.
True.
It's not customer driven.
That's absolute fact. I'm married to an artist. Shawn, you cannot even begin to argue that point. That is fact.
No, the first part of his point I agree with. The second part I take issue with.
It was a little hyperbole just to get your attention.
It's a lot of hyperbole.
A complete
okay.
freak.
Yeah.
You are a freak that you went from being an artist to being a market. I mean, that is like watching a dog talk. I mean, that's not a normal thing. You have to admit
you
to
guys
that,
are
right?
all freaks, let's be honest.
Well, for sure.
Yeah.
But he's even a bigger freak
true.
because he actually is an artist and actually became a successful business communicator and marketing person. Those two things usually are not in the same. Is that right, Shawn?
Yeah, I mean, there's some. I know some other talking dogs for sure.
Do you know some other artists that went into marketing that actually?
I would give my husband an example. Michael's a fine artist who's gone into marketing, so it happens, but it's very rare that, like Shawn, they can also run successful businesses without a business partner. That is a hard thing for them to do. Two different sides of the brain.
Yeah.
So just to tie this up, I think what I'm hearing from you is that, yeah, any business can be remarkable. And, you know, in preparation for this and thinking about it and thinking about the purple cow, it occurred to me, I think I would argue that the advice Seth Godin offers in Purple Cow is kind of generic advice. It's not like before he wrote that book, the conventional wisdom in marketing was that the way to sell more stuff is to be exactly like all of your competitors. I guess I'm saying I think the advice Godin is offering is kind of commodity advice. You have to distinguish yourself. He just executed it really well with a compelling image. A purple cow.
No.
Am I wrong, Shawn?
No, you're wrong. I mean, what he did is he used metaphor, which is the powerful thing. And that's not just an execution, is he found a way to tell his story in a way that was new and different and unique. And I would also argue you're simplifying his position a little bit in that he's not saying, oh, differentiation is important. That's been said forever. He's saying you have to be radically different. He's saying like you have to really like turn it up to 11. And that idea, I think, was a bit new, you know, in terms of his book. So I don't think it's just execution. It's more than that.
I read the book written by somebody that worked at Nordstrom's years ago, and she said something in it that was very smart. She said, it's not that Nordstrom's is so good. It's that everyone else is so bad. and there's truth to that. And my argument is being remarkable today means being really good.
I think that in a capitalist society, the businesses who do their job better will typically rise to the top. And I think you're seeing that. If you just want an example, look at what's happening with fast food. All of these fast food restaurants raise their prices, and saw their sales drop. They all went back to $5 menus, and they're starting to see that they're gaining business back. So the market will dictate. Same thing with customer service. The companies that are saying, I'll get back to you in 48 hours, they will be upped by a company that says 24 hours, and they will be upended by a company that says same day. So I think that consumers drive what we expect the businesses to do.
I mean, the giant asterisk you're not recognizing, Jackie, is monopoly and customer capture.
Fair.
So, you know, I just put a post up about how QuickBooks just raised their prices again, and somebody pointed out it was the third time in a year and a half. And I tell you, the engagement on that post and the frustration and the anger was palpable. And, you know, why don't people change? Change is really hard, and the alternatives are very difficult. And so there's a lot more capture, I would say customer capture, than there's ever been. So like, you know, try to do business and not use Google, or try to buy something and not be Amazon. And I think that's the tension that underlies a lot of this, and maybe why the service has gotten worse, Jay. It's that there are more and more businesses that they don't really give a damn because they don't have to give a damn.
I want to move on to a couple of other topics. I want to see if I can oversimplify a couple of other things before we run out of time. First, you mentioned Google. For several years, Google said it was going to get rid of cookies in Chrome. Now it says it's keeping them, but it's going to let individual users decide whether they want to allow them on their own browser or their own computer, which I would expect means most people are probably going to not allow them. So maybe this is a backdoor way to eliminating cookies. My question is, what does this mean for business owners or somebody who is trying to figure out how to do some digital marketing? Shawn, Jaci, either of you?
Thank you for not asking me because I've got nothing to say. No, I'm serious. I have nothing to say on this. So good call on that.
I think Jaci should field this one.
I'll jump in on this one. And Shawn, please share your thoughts as well. I think that it starts with the pushback from advertisers definitely influenced Google's decision. As much as no one wants to have their data mined, everybody wants to use the mined data. I think that the US, it apparently at this point is never going to really step up and put in the place that the protections that the EU have done. And so we are going to continue to see this individual choice. And for the most part, I think the majority of people don't care. They're not paying attention. They're annoyed by the pop-ups. They just want to get to whatever the page is. And I think there's a prevailing sense of they've already got all my info anyway. Everything that I use, from the credit card to the bank to the place where I buy tickets to the place where I, store this piece of data or that piece of data, has sent me a letter telling me they've been hacked. And so here we are.
I can tell you as a user, whenever that thing pops up, I always have to think, do I really want? And I usually say no, because I don't even know what it means and what they're going to do and what they're going to take. And it isn't a great thing as a buyer.
Shawn, what do you do when that pops up on your screen? Do you allow the cookies or not allow the cookies?
I mean, if I'm given the chance to reject it, I usually will. But a lot of businesses are sneaky and, kind of make it difficult, or the functionality doesn't work as well. And then I'm kind of in the Jaci camp on this one. It's just like, really, you think there's some secrets out there that you're maintaining? Like, no, they have all your information. It's everywhere. And I think there was a brief moment in time when they passed the canned spam law where I saw kind of a shift towards regulation and some recognition of privacy. And then it just was promptly ignored. And I just think consumers have no power in this realm.
And the upshot of that, Shawn, is that businesses will continue to be able to target audiences?
Yeah. I mean, they want customers. I think it'll get more expensive. I think it'll get more expensive and worse. I think Cory Doctorow's work around the enshittification of everything is a must read for any business owner, because essentially the things that have been good and have been successful in the past are getting worse and worse. And so continually relying on the same thing is a risky bet. So I think Jaci would be curious to hear what you hear about this, but I think the challenge to owners now is to diversify the ways that they get customers and they make connections. And we've been on a bit of a journey for the last 10 years of everything was digital and it was great to it's getting a lot harder.
You know what? I would use a different, not just diversify, I would say maximize, which simply means everything matters. Like I said, it's not just your digital advertising. Maybe that your office should look different if people come to your office. Maybe your people should dress differently. Maybe your logo should be looked at. Maybe
I thought you said nothing to say on this topic, Jay.
Well, I didn't. No, that was about cookies. Now
we're still talking about cookies.
All right, well, then I'll just sit here and wait for your next compelling topic to come up that I can jump in on.
That'll be in just a moment. But first, Jaci, excellent. I think Shawn sort of asked you a question. Did you want to respond?
I missed it. Jay occupied my space, my brain.
It's hard. Once Jay gets going, I mean, the oxygen goes out of the room.
Well, I'm going to give him another chance to get going then.
Thank you.
Jay, you've been going back and forth with your accountant over a bill for a while. Last time I spoke with you, you hadn't really decided whether you should just pay the bill or not. We're here to help. Tell us what's been going on.
Been my accountant for 25 years. I pay tens of thousands of dollars a year for accounting services. Had him come out. Never comes out. When I say never, I mean pretty much never. Hasn't been here in years. My staff never met him. Came out, had a meeting about, we were changing staff and had a meeting on where we were at. Spent an hour here, went back, typed up an overview of what happened at the meeting, which, okay, I didn't really need it, but all right. And then sent me a $2,500 bill for that. And then I was using their recruiting services to find a accounting person, and they couldn't find one. And I got a bill for, this is the part I'm struggling with. I went along with it. They told me it was $3.25 an hour, and I went along with it, and I shouldn't have. And so they sent me a bill once for $7,000, now another one for $8,000, and I let them know how
for recruiting. Recruiting?
Yeah, that didn't work. And I told them how unhappy I was in December. All right. I'll adjust the bill. Okay, haven't heard a word. Now all of a sudden, hasn't changed anything. Now they're calling to see why we haven't paid the bill. So I emailed them and said, hey, you were going to look at this bill, and yeah, I did. Yes, I will. What amount would you? What are you thinking? And I said to myself, yeah, I'm glad you're laughing because that's appropriate. You know what? If I screw something up in business, which I certainly have, I don't leave it on the customer. I say, you know what, Mrs. Jones, I'll tell you what, I'd like to give you half off on this. It didn't go right. I know you were just inconvenienced. Does that sound good? And I make the offer. I don't say to the customer, what would you like to pay for this? I just don't think it's her problem and her responsibility. So I've been struggling with whether to tell him, no, you tell me what you're going to do with the bill, and whatever it is, I'll pay it. Or whether I should tell him, I think you should take X off, or I don't know. So you tell me.
Well, first, what was the purpose of that meeting? Did he accomplish anything in that hour?
I made a major change in my accounting department, and he or I or both of us thought it'd be a good idea to come in and review the accounting department and what we do here. And he came out to go through that. Then his argument will probably, well, I had to put drive time in there. And I think, right, you mean the drive time that you were on the phone the entire time billing another client? That was the time I'm paying for?
Did that accomplish anything? Did his hour?
No. He went through, here's how the accounting department works, which gets me back to many accountants have never actually worked in an accounting department in a company and really don't necessarily understand how it all works or how it should work. And you'd think they would all know, but all I can tell you is there wasn't any great aha from this whole meeting. And maybe you could throw it back on me. Okay, I'm not listening, whatever. Okay, fair enough. I just think it was a kind of an egregious bill for coming out for an hour. And
so you haven't paid any of this yet?
No. Part of me thinks just pay the bill. And then part of me thinks send him an email and say, you know what? Here, take 25% off. I'll be happy. And then part of me says, send him a thing and just go, no, you know what? You decide. Just send me a bill for what you've heard my argument as to why I'm not happy about the bill. You decide what you think's appropriate. Send me the bill. I'll pay it. So those are the three choices.
Jackie, Shawn, what do you think?
How much do you value the relationship?
Are they doing a good job for you in other places?
That's a very tricky question because it depends what you expect out of your accounting firm. Are they doing the taxes properly? Yes. Have they helped me procedurally with giving me some insight into, I don't think you need a controller. I don't think you need a CFO. You need a controller. No, I don't think you need a controller. I think you need a blank. And do I think that there's some great accounting firm out there that's going to come in and do what I think No, I don't. I've lowered my expectations over the years. I believe that many, whatever word you want to use, accounting firms do your tax returns, period. And the ones that say they're advisors and stuff, my experience over the years, and this isn't just with one accounting firm, this is with 3 different accounting firms. My experience over the years with 3 different accounting firms is they couldn't advise themselves out of a paper bag.
And so you hire them to do a campaign to recruit new employees.
I hired they have a department of their accounting firm that does recruiting, and they charge $3.25 an hour, and they couldn't find a good candidate. All right, I'll give you the crux of the problem. They couldn't find a good candidate. So then she says, I hate to say it, I think we might have to use a contingency-based recruiter, and I know one that I use. Okay, if that's what it's going to take, do it. They hire the recruiter. They send me a resume. The resume has a person on there that's had 5 jobs over 6 years.
Oh my gosh.
Right. Exactly. I say to the recruiter, to the person at the accounting firm, I go, what the hell? This person's had 5 jobs in 6 years. She goes, they shouldn't send them to you. They should send them to me and I'll review them. I said, let me get this straight then. I should pay a contingency accounting firm to send you bad resumes, and then I should pay $3.25 an hour for you to go through the bad resumes to decide they're bad. yeah, this isn't working. And that was the last conversation I had with her. So that's why I was upset.
Do they do a good job with your accounting and taxes? Okay, your silence speaks volume.
No, I got it. No, I told you I've lowered my expectations over the years.
You shouldn't have to.
What I need, I don't think that's what accounting firms generally do. I don't think they come in and help you set up your accounting department. And I don't know what,
That's not the question, Jay.
Yes.
That's not the question she asked you. She asked you, are you happy with the basic shit that they're doing?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
and
great.
Listen, I'm not looking to blow. Listen, I'm a big boy. I would just fire him if I. So it's just a matter of I just want to do quote unquote the right thing, and I'm struggling with I am guilty as charged that I should have, when she said $3.25 an hour, I should have said to myself, boy, that's a lot of money for a non-CPA person who is probably making, you tell me, $125 a year. So they're making $60, $75 an hour, and they're billing them out at $3.25. I signed off on it. I said, okay, So
I mean, this is just endemic of two major problems. One is the recruiting industry in general, which is largely broken. And the second, which is the accounting industry, which has tried really hard to pivot to an advisory-based model, but really is having a hard time doing it. And I would say a tiny fraction is successful at that. And in my experience, I think your hunch is accurate that these folks can do taxes just fine because that's a rules and compliance-based universe. And that if you need somebody who's actually dynamic and can think differently and creatively, that's a different company.
It isn't even just that. It's about personnel. It's about interviewing my accounting manager and figuring out, should this person be left? That kind of stuff. It's business. It's straight business, HR business. And that's not what accountants usually do. HR and accountants are kind of two different animals.
So you knew that, though, when you hired them to try to do these things, right? Does that factor into your decision about whether to pay them or not?
I'm just struggling with, I signed off on the $3.25 an hour and I shouldn't have. And here, let's just get the big perspective here, because this is important as a business owner. If you hire a recruiting firm, they're going to charge, you tell me, 30%, right? John?
If they're contingent, there's also retained search.
Okay, but let's just say you do that 30%. And let's say for just a blank number, you're going to pay someone $120,000. Okay, so you're going to pay $36,000 in contingency. So the fact that I've spent 12 with the idea that maybe by buying the 12, I have the risk of not finding somebody, but if I pull it off, I saved a lot of money. Okay, that's part of the balancing act of why you do contingency versus not. It's not a sure thing if you pay them per hour. You're gambling that, well, I think I'll be able to find somebody when I spend the 15 instead of spending the 36. So I knew what I was getting into with that. On the other hand, I think whatever time was put in dealing with this recruiter, I think that's where they owe me something. So maybe I'm helping my self here by talking to myself. Maybe that's the answer. Say, you know what? Take 20% off and I'll pay the bill. I think they owe me that, because I think that was absolute bullshit that they sent me a resume and her answer, instead of her saying, that's ridiculous, you know what, don't use this guy, she tells me she should review him first. Really?
It just feels like you've stumbled into a really bad fit. Like I said, the recruiting industry is a mess. It's not usually advantageous for employers. I mean, most of the clients I have, they go a totally different route in terms of getting talented help because A, it's expensive to do as recruiters, and B, the incentives are all wrong. For the recruiter, if there's a lot of churn and turnover, it's to their advantage. And that's the broken part of the model.
Okay, before we get the hate mail, let's just all agree there are some wonderful recruiters out there that do an excellent job and care about their clients. I'm sure of that.
Are you going to say the same for accountants, Jay?
Yes, absolutely.
I just want to say I do know of good firms. You know, but they're not contingent. They're retained search generally, and really, if you shop hard and you look at their process and their guarantees, it's a really good way to understand. Have they set their model up in a way that is built for success for both groups? And
well, you tell me. Do you think $3.25 an hour is a reasonable number?
That's not the right question. you're buying on their parameter, which is a broken parameter. I just think actually you've just found a poor vendor. I mean, that's just fundamental. So 2.25 would be too much. 100 an hour would be too much. Any amount of money is too much because their system isn't very good. So you need to find a different vendor that has a process and a methodology that works well. If they're valuable to you from a tax perspective and from getting this stuff done, then, pay some portion of it, pay all of it. I don't know, just to protect the relationship if that's valuable to you.
No, I'm certainly not going to not pay it. It's just a matter of
just move on.
Yeah.
Just move on. But hire somebody whose process is remarkable. Back to the purple cow. You found a very unremarkable vendor. I'm sorry.
All right. My thanks to Shawn Busse, Jay Goltz, and Jaci Russo, and to our sponsor, The Great Game of Business, which helps businesses use an open book management system to build healthier companies. You can learn more at greatgame.com/21hats. Thanks, everybody. One thing before you go. Everything we do at 21 Hats is created by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs to help us all learn together. So if you get something out of this podcast or out of the morning report, please tell a friend, tell an enemy, tell every business owner you know. Your word of mouth, entrepreneur to entrepreneur, will always be the most effective way to build this community for all of us. Thank you. It means a lot. This episode was produced by another entrepreneur, Jess Stuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Thanks for listening, everyone.